Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and welcome to Season 4 of Call Your Hits and the first episode of 2024. Thanks so much for being here with us today, for choosing our podcast yet again to listen to on this week to start you off your year. Hopefully start off your year right.
We'll try.
Yeah, totally. And Pat and I have talked about this before, but we really enjoy being able to do this podcast for you. It's a good moment for Pat and I to reconnect. Not that we don't speak literally all the time, but it's a good way for us to just talk about airsoft and catch up.
It's a good way to make sure we actually make time to hang out a bit.
Yeah, and to check in on what we're thinking about with respect to airsoft and how we're engaging with the hobby and our plans and hopes and all this kind of stuff. So thanks for being along for the ride. Today, because it is the first episode of 2024, it's a brand new year, folks. The theme is change for today, and I don't want anybody to read anything into that theme. We're not talking about any big changes or anything like that, but we want to talk about some of the change that we've seen in the sport, in our community, and highlight how we have changed as well, and how that's that's a normal part of sort of growth in any sort of hobby, right?
My first response was, "Don't shake me, my pockets are empty."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got no change to spare for sure.
That part isn't a change in
the... This was actually prompted by a question that I saw on the Discord last month, maybe the month before, that was about what was the biggest change that we've seen in airsoft since we started playing. And I thought, that's a really interesting question, because Pat and I, as we've talked about before, have been playing airsoft for a long time. We've been playing airsoft longer than some Discord members have been alive, which is pretty crazy to think about. And I'm not saying that as a flex.
For Phil than it is for me.
Yeah,
I teach human children. They remind me how old I am daily.
Yeah, I suppose so. But a lot has changed. When we started playing airsoft, when I started playing airsoft, it was 2006. I don't think Facebook existed when I started playing airsoft, and now it still exists, unfortunately. Right? But that's a lot of time for things to change and to grow.
What's a TikTok?
Yeah, what's a TikTok? Yeah, forget that. Or Snapchat or whatever else, whatever the youngsters are doing these days. But it's a lot of time to change. And often I feel and Pat, you can certainly echo this, I think. When you look at something so closely, it's hard to see the change. If you're looking at it every single day, every single week, every single month, you just sort of grow along with it, and you don't realize sort of how, looking back, wow, hang on, this isn't at all what it used to be like, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because we talk about games we played in the past and stuff, but I still have days when I think of airsoft and I think about 6-person games at Redcliffe, and I'm like,
yeah,
nope, hang on.
Yeah, and that's a funny one, because if we were to say, put on the lens first, about how has airsoft changed in our community since we started playing, I mean, how hasn't it changed? I think would be an easier question to answer. It's fundamentally completely different.
Well, I mean, at a beginning baseline, honestly, the first thing I think we need to talk about, how has this changed? It's a lot cheaper to play airsoft in Canada than what it was when we started, and gear is infinitely more available.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The degree to which I appreciate genuinely being able to go check my favorite retailer in Canada for stuff I want, as opposed to the Airsoft Canada forum, because there is nowhere else.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I became the Age of Airifier locally for Airsoft Canada, and that, I hesitate to say gave me elite status, because I don't believe in that kind of stuff. But everybody had to come to me in order to get Age Verified to be able to buy airsoft guns, because that was literally the only place until Frontline started carrying it, and then some other retailers came on the scene.
Yep,
but you're totally right. And it was really expensive. It was almost. I mean, if you were on a student budget, unless your parents were buying it for you, I guess. But you couldn't do it, right? It was not a thing.
Well, I mean, I look at or I think about when I started playing, I bought my Scar, and my Scar ran me I think $700.
Yep.
When I started playing, And I mean, I haven't looked at a G&G SCAR in a while, but they're definitely way under that, right? And like
Yeah.
inflation since 2007 hasn't been super kind. um, so that's both a substantial change in how much this hobby, this sport costs to participate in, um, but also like hugely positive. I mean, again, your selection of guns was, well, I checked like I remember when I was looking for, um, looking for an M16, or even, when I was looking for a P90, or when I was first looking at guns, like, the first gun I wanted to buy was a JG G36 that I'm
Yeah.
super happy in retrospect I didn't get, because they're very plasticky. No offense to the G36 fans, just I'm me like gun that feel like me not break.
Mhm.
But just oh yeah, and the only reason I didn't end up with it was that it sold before I like decided I was sure I wanted it, and then like 2 days later a SCAR went up. I'm like, you've too bad.
Yep.
Um,
So I mean that the availability I think is one thing, but we've talked about sort of Redcliffe before on the podcast, and for those who played in the area, you know what we're talking about. But it's hard to overstate just how large that area was from an airsoft perspective,
it,
right? Like
yeah,
it was huge,
I mean,
and
like you can go. Like if you went for a hike up there and just hiked through the areas that we used for airsoft, like didn't do the connected like East Coast Trail or anything, you can do that for like a couple hours, no problem, without
yeah,
really
just
repeating any of the loop.
yeah, if you want to circumnavigate the whole area, like I mean, it's acres and acres and acres of space. And so now where we've gone from that, and I mean, some of it was impassable; it was hard to get around, like it was thick shrub, all this kind of stuff. Playing around ruins, and now we're playing on a more curated field, which is is different. I hesitate to say it's safer because it does have same sort of concerns that you see at a lot of airsoft fields. Not throwing any shade; it's just a statement of fact. Um,
What
but
can you do?
it's yeah, it is what it is.
Right?
But the field is significantly smaller, right? And so that has been a huge change. But I think one thing I'm really curious about actually has to do with how our mindsets have changed with respect to airsoft since we started playing. Like, do you remember what was going through your minds in the first games that you were playing?
The very first game that I was playing, how does this work?
Mhm. But I mean, just in
you
general,
know,
like your
but
first season, let's call it, right?
yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, I think for me, a lot of my first season was like basic, basic airsoft replica handling, just in a not in a like tech way, but in a like I didn't know anything about firearms really. I had done some shooting with like a pellet gun, like the break open action air pellet guns.
Yeah,
Or
the you'll shoot your eye out kid one, right?
yeah, exactly right. The
Yeah,
ones that my father used to shoot at his brothers when they were playing cops and robbers. Um,
nice.
just like okay, um, but yeah, don't do that. So yeah, that was that was a big part of it. And just like I remember, like talking to you and like trying to figure out, how to get better at this in a sort of how do I use this thing tactically.
Hmm.
Um, spent a lot of time shopping for airsoft gear. Still spend a lot of time shopping for airsoft gear. So I guess that's not a change.
Yep.
But um, yeah, mindset wise, like I definitely was in a how does this work kind of place, but also like I want to play this every weekend. I want to do this as often as possible. It was very, very new and shiny, as hobbies go. It was a hell lot of fun. Um, it involved some stuff that like I really quite liked outside of the airsoft hobby. Hiking up to Redcliffe was always just like it's a really pretty spot.
Hmm. Yep.
And I enjoyed the like getting out in the woods aspect of it, which is something that we don't get at Frontline, regrettably. Like, I mean, there are woods around, but it's Redcliffe is very aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Frontline is in like a swamp.
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, in terms of like mindset change stuff, definitely. My views about what constitutes good gear and like how much I care about um how skilled I think a player is has definitely changed. There was definitely a point where like I was daunted by some of the people we were playing with who were like quite good.
Hmm.
If you remember like Mason and his actually upgraded gun back
Yep, I
when
do.
that was sorcery to us. And like there's the rub, right? Like, we talk about there's no magical fairies inside your airsoft gun. Crack it open, tinker with it, be sensible about it. But like, you can learn to do this. But like I definitely, was intimidated by doing it for a
Oh
long
yeah.
time.
Yeah, I mean, for
Um,
conservatively for 4 years, well, like they had magical fairies inside,
totally,
right? And like even the
um,
idea of like, oh, well, can I use a different battery or like no, you can't. Like that's how it is. That's how, and very much like almost like a child, right? Like this is a toy, and like I don't want to break it, etc. As opposed to understanding like, no, it's a mechanical system, and this is how it works. And
yeah,
I think that was huge. But
totally.
I mean, I know
It's
for me, like thinking about games in particular, like I spent a lot of time just being afraid, like not like afraid, but like concerned about like, oh, don't get hit. You don't want to get hit. Don't do that. You're gonna get hit. I don't want to get hit. Or
the period in
I'm
which we were
concerned
still
about going up.
daunted by that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still deal with that every now and then. But I didn't have the muscle memory. I didn't have the reps like I do now, where I can just switch my brain off and do, right? Whereas back then, like it was active thinking all the time,
Totally.
and
And
most of the time it was like, oh god, don't get hit, right?
I mean, let's be real. Like, I don't think we, you know, in 2007, I don't think either of us knew what a ready up was. um,
Yeah,
you know, and it's interesting because I think of it as one of my like least trying to improve portions of playing airsoft, even though I was thinking about like, oh, how can I do this better? Because I wasn't actually making a lot of effective impact while thinking about that and trying stuff.
hmm
Um, so yeah, it was definitely a lot of like, as you just said, thinking while playing instead of doing, and a lot of being unsure about what I was doing on the field kind of stuff. Um, you know, not in I wasn't having fun kind of way, just in a like, I didn't know much about airsoft. I didn't know much about, um, you know, airsoft shooting or real shooting. So I had very limited resources to draw on in terms of like knowledge. Um, which feels very distant from today in a lot of ways.
yeah. Well,
You
it's
know,
funny because same thing for me. Like yeah, in terms of the knowledge, but like I thought I knew everything there was to know, and that has changed a lot in my mindset just in general. Like
I mean,
when I was younger, I was very much on the know-it-all spectrum, whereas now I like fully go into it being like I'm the dumbest person here, and that's fine. That's fine,
and I
right?
mean, like, I think we, part of that is just, and I mean, no offense to any of our viewers, but like 20-year-olds often be like, 18-year-olds
Yeah.
often be like, so, um, I'm not as inclined to beat myself up for thinking, or you up for thinking we were hot shit when we were 21.
Yeah,
Like
but it's interesting
make
because
fun of myself a little.
it creates issues though, because when I think about this, like in my mind, like I thought, like, oh man, you're the best at this. You've been doing this for 2 years. That's like an eternity. You know everything there is to know. You look the part. You have the cool gear because you have a big boy job. You can afford to buy all this stuff, and you are good, and therefore when you play, you have to be good. And so that created this notion, which we've talked about recently, of like there's pressure, there's expectation on like I have to do well. And when
Yeah,
you have that expectation, then you can't get hit,
and it's a
right?
silly
And
kind
then
of expectation because it's internal, right? Like no one is looking at you and going, man, if Phil doesn't stomp face, like he sucks, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it definitely took me a little longer to get into the like, oh, I should be good at this and I should be getting kills and I should be winning games by myself, like, and that's not as ego driven when there are 10 people playing and you're doing a 5 on
Yeah.
5 deathmatch, as it could be. But um, I think it's definitely fair to say that like by the time I was, my second season playing, it was sort of like, oh yeah, like I've got good gear. I know what I'm doing. I played a lot of games. I should be good at this. I
Mhm.
think I'm in that particular capacity less inclined to put pressure on myself than you are. Um, but like there is that, oh yeah, like should I be able to carry the team kind of thing? Um,
There's
and
also
like
the question of desire. Like for me, like I at the time, like I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to win, right? I wanted to be the best guy. right? Or be one of the best guys. And I mean, that's not to say that that's shitty, like, but maybe for me, that's not the vibe, right? Because now in retrospect, I could be like, you know what, like that didn't create the right feelings inside me, right? When I was playing, and I was focusing too much on wanting to win and not enough on trying to be good. But I think that was a huge shift once we started rolling with the team, right? But
Yeah,
I'm
I
getting
mean,
ahead of myself.
one of the big takeaways is just, oh, hey, it's a lot better for both of us if we think about this in terms of how can I be better at this than I was last week, rather than how can I be better at this than arbitrary other player or arbitrary goalpost that doesn't really exist other than my brain.
Yeah.
You know, and like honestly, big props to, especially at least in my head, Chris, for sort of like being a really grounding force there and just being like, okay, sure, but what does that actually mean? Like, how do we make that a practical goal to progress towards?
Yeah, definitely
Um,
agree. That was a huge
you know,
change.
he's a little more down to earth than we used to be, certainly, probably than we are still.
Well, yeah, but I think it's fair, and sometimes you need those people in your life to be like, okay, but like, what is this doing for you, or how does this help, or whatever. And you know, we've had people on the team who are fine and just having fun with the drills that we were doing. That's great, but also, you know, like we've talked about before, some of the drills we were doing were not really it. And so, as we modified our approach and changed over the years, especially more recently, you know, it's made a big impact. But compared to where we were when we started the team in 2009 or 2008, 2009. Can't remember exactly. I think it was 2000. Can't remember. I have to go back. But like in terms of where we were when we started, like it's like night and day, right? And our approach has matured. I think as we've matured, and if we were to play games at Redcliffe today, which is unfortunately not really feasible, but if we could go back in time and play to the way that it on the field the way that it used to be, like I think our approach would be very different.
I mean, like, even if you think about uh, how how we played the last time we played at Redcliffe,
Yeah.
you know, um, because we were substantially closer to where we are now in terms of our
Hmm.
gear when we finished up playing there. Like the last photos of me playing a game up there, I think I'm using like Mark's old rifle as a loaner or something. um,
Yeah.
and I think the Mark 18 was in the mail kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
And our approach was substantially different. I think these days it would be different again, because one of the practical things for sure is like, when we stopped playing at Redcliffe, probably the only air-hopped gun that was kicking around was the AK that Fong used to own.
Hmm.
Um, so the majority of our kit in terms of like accuracy, in terms of build quality and stuff, wasn't as good as it's gotten for sure. And that's leaving out the fact that HPA definitely has made a difference in how we play, or at least has made a difference in how I
Yeah.
play, in terms of what
Definitely.
my gear does and is capable of. Now, ironically, I also feel like playing at Frontline is a lot easier for HPA setups than playing in the woods would have been, because, the additional, probably another carbon fiber tank required for, you've got one, I've got one, probably a third one, so that we could both play the full day and be sure we had enough air, would have been a thing, right? And that would have been a
Yep.
barrier. Um,
And not to
Neither.
mention, you know, you have the line, it gets tangled in trees, and like we don't have, sparsely populated forests like they do in some sites, like on the mainland in the US. And so it's hard to move around in the woods on a good day, right?
Yeah,
Let
I mean,
alone, if you've got a line on, you getting tangled and stuff, right?
like just I think the thrashing through giant piles of brush portion of the exercise probably would
Hmm.
still suck a lot more with a HPA line. Um, it would certainly involve like, more, I guess, post middle of woods gear check. Um, and I mean, we did a lot of like, just like, okay, so if you've shoved through enough trees, make sure your sidearm, your mags, everything is still there before you move on, kind of stuff,
Yeah.
because it's just that dense a little coniferous forest up there that you kind of have to.
Yeah. How many
Um,
times have did we have to backtrack to look for a pistol or grenade or something that got left in there, or have to go after a game and try and find and
for
retrace
sure,
your steps, right?
and I mean, it
Yeah.
was one of those situations where like, um, you know, at Frontline, like I've been looking into, and I'm still probably going to stick with the Serpa that I've used before, but like I've been looking a lot into what I want to do for a holster for the PX4. And like at Redcliffe, like, yeah, level 1 retention. Level 2? Sure. Just because that makes it harder for the tree to take my pistol. The pistol lanyard had days where it was like, that seems like it has an appeal right now. At Frontline, it's like, yeah, just basic Kydex that's friction fit, sure, no problem. Right?
Yeah.
I have
Well,
no
it's
issue with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up the gear too, because that's one aspect I think that has changed a lot since we started playing, is the availability of tactical gear. And both in terms of, so like when I started playing, like you could get paintball tactical gear. So that was certainly one thing. The airsoft wasn't on the market, so like brands like Emerson and stuff like that like didn't really exist. But you could get like cheap versions of the good brand. So like you could look at like an Eagle plate carrier or whatever, and like they were cheaper than the really expensive things.
Oh, I mean, you want to talk about a mindset change, right? So like, when I started out, I briefly ran a like black cross draw attack vest, 3 double M4 mag pouches on the wrong side and a pistol holster on the wrong side also.
Yep.
And I ran that because that's what I had. Like, that's what I could get.
And like and the availability, like, I mean, you could go to certain retailers or like surplus stores. Actually, it's really interesting. One of the surplus stores that I ordered from initially, like in 2000, and in 2002, I used Airsoft Canada to find surplus gear for paintball because I was playing paintball at the time. And so in 2002, I ordered from Army Issue Surplus in Mississauga, and I ordered like a pair of CatPad BDUs and CatPad knee pads, or black knee pads and black shoulder elbow pads, and a bunch of other stuff. And we actually, John and I found him again recently. I just came like as a brainwave, and that's where we're going to order our DCU tops for
nice.
Iron Horse. But I digress. So like that was one of the only places, and you were buying either surplus stuff or you were buying real stuff that was either cheap or you were buying the full price stuff. And nowadays, like you got repro gear coming basically out of every orifice at every quality level. Totally. From the absolutely horrendous tan pants that are like a cry cut replica that I bought back in December.
They're so bad.
They're terrible. To the Idle Gear replicas that I wear that are pretty good, and the Emerson replicas that are, a little bit better than that. All the way to the Shadow Tactical ones, which are real steel, but like kind of low end real steel replicas, and then you can get the real stuff. And you can get the real stuff. It's just, it's very expensive. Back when we started
Premium
playing, like
prices.
It was, yeah. And it, could you get a Cry uniform in 2006? Like, I don't think so. Or if you did, you were paying a lot of money. Now you're still paying a lot of money, but not quite as much if you can get them in Canada. Yeah.
I mean, like for me, one of the absolute like, oh yeah, cool things that just popped, like, cycled into my brain as we were talking about this is, in terms of differences of approach. So like that first season, like I got a Cyraz pretty quickly, and because you had one.
Yep.
Like, and literally just, yeah, it works for Phil, good enough for me. And, both of us were doing sort of a like, frankly, like PMC impression, kind of thing. And so a lot of our kit choices were a little more cosplay oriented and a little less like practical, is this good for what we're doing oriented? Because like, let me tell you, a maritime Cyraz is not a good choice for moving through densely packed coniferous forest.
We thought it was great.
Oh man. And like, I still think like, unambiguously, I still think that kit looked cool. But like, it was also, and I mean, we've talked about this before, like, all right, cool. I have infinite real estate, right? I'm going to carry, the kitchen sink with me, right?
Yeah.
Like I have just this side of like a tactical baby carrier in case I need to carry like one of the other players. I don't know. And that's definitely a change. And like, I mean, part of the reason we liked the Cyraz, both of us, I think, was that like there was not a lot of getting hit in the torso while you were wearing it because you were completely covered in Cordura, and like there was no issue with hit calling because it made a nice loud thwack. So no issue there. So
I mean,
that's
there wasn't a whole lot of hit calling issues back then anyway, but yeah, I take your point. I
mean,
think
honor's
one of
easy
the
with
things
10 people, right? Like,
yeah, well, that's true too, and like people self-select in that situation as well. I think coming back to the gear though, one of the things that I've noticed now is just also like the form factors of gear. Like there's so much available out there, and like as soon as a company releases a new type of pouch or a new type of plate carrier, or a new type of whatever,
15
you
minutes
can
later,
find
someone's made a
yeah,
repro. Like,
yeah, you can find a shitty repro of it, and then you can buy it and try it and see. Like a lot of the stuff that I've tried over the last couple of years, either I bought a better replica or I just used the shitty replica, and that was like, this is not really good, right? And you can do that, and that I think also allows you to test out new ways of playing and new ways of gearing yourself up at a low sort of risk to you. Like, I mean, if you want to go out and buy like a $600 pair of UF Pro pants or whatever, like you probably want to make sure that that form factor works for you, etc. And so because there's so many repros out there, it's a good, it's a good opportunity. And you might say, well, that's a waste. Just buy the real stuff from the get go. But if you don't know if you're going to like it, like it's, I have these pouches that I just bought, these wingman pouches that are replicas of some whatever Spiritus systems maybe or something. They're really, really crappy, but fundamentally they're the same form factor. I can figure out if I like that form factor, if the sizing is right, etc., before I decide to spend, big boy money on it, right? And they were $5.
and I mean, we can, if you're going to talk about that sort of thing, like we have absolutely got access to, hey, I want to try chest rig. All right, buy one on Amazon for $50, $40.
Yeah. Well, that's too. Amazon wasn't on the scene. Yeah.
Oh, that's a change. um, so like just the fact that you can go, well, I'm thinking about trying this piece of kit. Is there a cheap sort of okay-ish version that I can mess around with to decide if I want to spend actual money on it, right? And like realistically, even a cheap chest rig is going to hold up well enough that you'll probably get a season or two out of it to decide, right?
Yeah, and you just spurred something in my mind, and I want to bring it up because I'm guaranteed, especially for the younger listeners, they have no idea what this is. To give you an idea of what we went through to buy gear, for some of the gear that I bought from Army Issue Surplus, when I agreed to make the purchase for the gear, he gave me his bank account number, transit number, and branch or institution number, which are the numbers on the bottom of a check. Right?
Those are the numbers that you give people so that they can pay you.
So that they can direct deposit into your account. So I took those numbers and I went to his bank, which was, I can't remember what the bank is, like the overall bank, not the branch, obviously. I went in, I saw a teller, and I said, here's the account information. I would like to deposit this amount of money into their bank account. And they went, okay. They gave me a receipt. I went home. I told him, hey, I deposited this into your account. This is your receipt. And then once that happened, then he was like, okay, I'll ship your stuff. Right? As opposed to today where you, I think he did send me a tracking number because it was above certain amount or whatever, because he got it insured. He was still a business, right?
Totally.
But like compared to now, like if you want something, you just go online and buy it, and it's pay for it with PayPal, and then you ship it. Like, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, back in my day, but like the reality is like that's what it was like back then. Which if you're trying to make like small purchases to try and flush out your kit over time, that is definitely a barrier to doing that, right? As opposed to now, where it's like our advice many times have been like, hey, if you want to try something different, just try it.
Yeah, for good or ill, if I want a Chicom chest rig, I can just literally click the new tab button, click Amazon, click send it to me, and it'll be here next week. Like, or the week after,
exactly.
Right?
So I think that's a change in terms of how we get gear, but I think the fact that there's so much availability out there, whether it's from Amazon or one of the many different retailers like EB Airsoft or like eHobby or any of the other ones, I don't know which ones are still in operation. But like
just the fact that you can conjure yourself new kit, in volume whenever you want is pretty cool.
And not to mention cosplay pieces too. Like, I mean, the pants and the tactical shirt that I have, that I ordered from China, that are the reproduction ones or whatever, they are absolutely horrendous, but they would be fine for a cosplay. Totally. I can spend $40 or $50 on a cosplay. That'd be perfect. Right? Yeah, I mean, like, would I wear that to airsoft? No, but anyway,
it's one of the, like you want a sort of funny, like think back moment, right? So some of the cosplayers in our local sci-fi community have been into like, Stargate cosplay, and that's all airsoft gear, because that's what the Stargate guys were using.
Well, yeah.
Which is funny to think about in sort of retrospect.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think obviously like our kit's come a long way, partly because, I when I last bought a chest rig, and I don't see myself changing from it ever, I was in a position to buy a real one, and it, the amount of use I inflict on it will never wear it out. Like,
Yeah.
carry on.
One of the things I was really keen to ask you about is about replicas in particular, and like, or what's related to replicas. And I'm curious from your perspective, aside from HPA, which we've talked a lot about, what are some of the most, like, the biggest, most impactful or meaningful changes that you've seen with respect to replicas and their
Man,
use over the last,
bottom line,
10 years?
the degree to which the quality of stuff I can randomly buy, like that is an airsoft replica of anything, has gone up enormously.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's the variety aspect of just like, so right now, again, things I should probably not be able to do for my own well-being financially, but like right now I can click two buttons and order any form factor of airsoft gun that I might be interested in from a retailer I trust in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, almost all of those guns are as good as or better than what we started with, right?
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Like when I got into teching at first, because gotta fix broken stuff, uh, you know, one of the first things that we put in our guns, because it was like, oh my god, it's magic. This is bleeding edge airsoft technology, was a MOSFET.
Yeah.
Right. And those MOSFETs were like, they were great. They did everything that a MOSFET should do still, really, other than, I guess these days Bluetooth is pretty standard because we live in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Science. But, uh, you know, I had put those in myself. I had to wire a 4-wire MOSFET setup manually. I had to learn what wires were. Like, let's be real, my electrical knowledge before I started was
Mm-hmm.
like there's
Yep.
nothing here. To right now, again, like I can literally go buy an airsoft gun right now. Like, I would like an M4 that shoots better than my Scar did. Click, click, done, and it will have a MOSFET in it, and I won't have to do anything with it.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. It's a huge,
Like
huge shift.
relative to, again, all right, what's available on this forum being sold secondhand, because these are impossible to get in Canada. You know, so like there's that. There's, you can buy mags, right? Like, I literally, you and I both would be on Airsoft Canada. Oh man, someone put up mags, buy mags, right? And just like
Yep.
sending a guy,
Yeah, man, I'd forgotten about that, but you're
like
totally right.
PayPaling a guy $50 because it's just like, we don't know when we're going to be able to get more. Half these things, like half the ones we've bought don't feed in our guns. Another third of the ones we have that like feed in our guns only work some of the time. And like, we can't buy brand new ones. We can't buy a box of EPM mags. They don't exist. The company that's selling them now doesn't exist. There's nowhere we can buy them. So it's like, well, I just bought like, 30 used mags for $60 because someone was selling them, and hopefully some of them work.
Yeah, totally. Like real cap mags and mid caps, and like, yeah, I remember.
And I mean,
yeah,
if you want a
for sure.
perspective change, like when we started, we were like, oh yeah, no, we're gonna use real cap mags because like that's as simulationist as we can get and as bad as we can get, and we're hardcore airsofters, and like, unless someone is making you do that, that's a terrible idea. Just because, like, at the time, it was like, all right, so Phil and I running 10 real cap mags, 300 rounds each, right? Cal running a, like, Kraken AK with a 600 round high cap. That's like, this is actually not a good choice, right?
Yeah, really.
And not like,
and we weren't drilling reloads, and we weren't drilling ready up, so like we weren't as good as we are today either. So yeah.
Now, I will say, like, dead on, one of the practical things that does come out of that for me, like I have to admit, is that the thing that got me into airsoft was playing it with you. The thing that kept me playing it for a long while was feeling like a badass when, like, we all know I'm a goddamn teddy bear. And reloading feels badass. It still feels bad. I still enjoy reloading. I know what the hell I'm doing now. Like, I can do it much better than I used to be able to. But
yeah,
the feeling good factor was always there. So like the 30 round mid caps definitely had that like, oh yeah, you know, like we feel good, yeah, manly.
Yeah.
Um,
You
you
know,
know,
when this question was asked to me on the Discord about like the biggest change, one of the things that I really stuck to, I think, and I think is probably one of the most impactful meaningful ones for us at least, is BB weight. When we started, everyone was using 2 zeros, and like 2 5s were like probably the standard
yep,
for
yeah,
us,
the
but
2.5
certainly not
the two
everyone was
five
using it.
BB bastards, and then like at some point we were like, maybe we should try 2.8s.
Yeah, and like the concern of like, oh, can we actually get away with using 2/8 or whatever? And at the time, the price difference was not meaningful or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it
And
was
like,
just a like,
yeah,
will
the
our
people
gun?
using the long range rifles were using the 2/8 or whatever,
Yeah, and
right? Like that was the thing.
it's like, you know, I mean, even up to when I was running the M16, which was sort of like the first, I would say, genuinely upgraded airsoft gun I ever owned, as opposed to like moderately tinkered with. I was
Mm-hmm.
using .28s, and it was like, yeah, this is my DMR, and I'm on .28s, and now I'm like,
Yeah. Now,
hmm.
like 3 zeros is the absolute bare minimum for any of us. 3 2s, I was using 3 zeros, and then 3 6s later on this season, and then uh, I
Yep.
think I've got some bags of 3 2s, and I think that's where my sweet spot is going to be.
I've been using
Uh,
3.2s for ages, but
mhm,
I've been using them sort of as like this is the bottom of accurized of DMR kind of weights for me. And that's
mhm.
what my gun's built to do, so I'll use them. But like, I'm also using them in the LMG because I put 2.8s in the LMG and was like even before I hit fit, and it was like, nah,
Yeah,
like just nah.
yeah, but I mean, I think it's really hard to overstate just how impactful going from a 2.5 to like a 3 zero or 3 2
Oh
is
man.
in terms of your range and accuracy
Well,
and
and like,
consistency and brush clearing and all that stuff, right?
but and like, I mean, at the time, you know, half the people who were playing were using like the Walmart, you know, has the seam on it. You can feel it when you roll it between your fingers. You can see it. BBs
That's
that
true.
are like
Yeah.
0.12. And
Hmm.
everyone else was running 0.2. So like the 0.25s were actually genuinely a mechanical advantage, because they punched through the brush better and they held a truer flight path, especially in the shitty ass wind on top of a cliff in Newfoundland, right? Like,
Hmm.
so yeah, solid.
I think too one of the big changes that I saw in my time, and again, we're not talking about HPA, but certainly the switch from nickel metal hydride batteries to lipo batteries was
which
huge,
is,
right?
I,
Huge
and I
change.
mean, funnily enough, for the most part, if you're being sane, that really is a switch that comes with the lipos existing, or
Yeah,
rather, that comes with the
the
MOSFETs existing,
MOSFETs. Yeah.
right? So you have this situation where it's like, oh, I can run better batteries, and part of that is just the better batteries becoming available, right? Like,
Yep.
because frankly, a lot of the parts in airsoft guns owe a lot to RC cars, right? Like the motor your electric gun is running on was designed to run an RC car. Your or similar, right? The batteries you're using were designed to run an RC car.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, I mean, one of the teching changes is, yeah, there was a development of, oh, hey, there's enough money in airsoft as a thing for companies to be like, oh, maybe we should make electric motors that are tuned to be operated the way an airsoft gun uses them instead of the way an RC car or RC plane uses them.
Yeah.
Cool, right? But yeah, no, the just, hey, we can put a MOSFET in this, and then we can run a lipo, and we don't have to worry for the most part about the possibility of the lipo like exploding or lighting our gun on fire. Yeah, that's
It's
huge.
interesting that it's interesting that you bring that up too, because I think as I look back to how we interacted with airsoft for many, many, many years, I think a lot of it also comes, and one of the big changes has been thanks to YouTube and channels and stuff,
Well, I mean,
the
that exists,
availability of
right? Like,
information.
just
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but like the availability of information, right? So we had a lot of like, I remember the first time somebody talked about lipos. I'm like, can my gun run a lipo? Is it going to explode? Is it going to do this? Is going to do that? And our fundamental understanding of how airsoft replicas operate, both in terms of how they function mechanically and how they work as a system, has grown exponentially. So we understand everything there is to know scientifically speaking, right? Like, I'm sure there's stuff that we don't understand how it works really, but like fundamentally, like we know how they work. We know what the forces, the mechanisms are. There is no fairy dust. We know that, if we plug this battery in, is my gonna catch fire? No, we don't have to worry about that because we know how the mechanism of action, etc. Our knowledge about airsoft and how it works, teching wise and otherwise, has expanded so much
And like
that we've gone from a place of I was, afraid of taking the muzzle device off of my airsoft replica because I didn't know, was I going to like tweak the barrel or whatever else, not realizing that it's not physically connected to my barrel in any way, shape, or form, right? To now being like, you buy a brand new gun and basically just strip it down and do whatever, have your way with it, basically, right?
And I mean, also, like, say what you will about like YouTube algorithms and all that jazz, and they're not necessarily the best thing, but when we started playing, right, when I started teching, I literally was like reading the tech forum on Airsoft Canada and the links out from it, because I was like, okay, this dude knows what he's talking about and is reliable, so his stuff that he's linking me to won't be stupid, as opposed to now where it's like, yeah, I need to know how to take apart this gun. YouTube. Cool.
Yeah,
done.
that's true.
So I honestly think that like one of the big changes that techs have experienced is just the like amount of information out there is way larger, but also it's way better curated to make sure there's less misinformation, right? Like, because I mean, when we looked into lipos, there was a lot of stuff that was like, yeah, no, like if you put the wrong, voltage of lipo in your gun, it will like cause your gun to just like spontaneously combust. That's not true. Did 2009 Pat know that? No.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, okay. And a bunch of other stuff like that, I mean, like, looping back to the just like how different are guns now, question. When we started playing, if you were, when it was possible to buy a gun from a shop, which was rarely, it would be shipped with a spring in it that was so overtuned it couldn't possibly function. Right? So like when I bought my M16, it came with a like 490 FPS spring and a normal motor and normal gears. It just and a NiCad battery. Like there were no worlds where it was operating without me swapping the spring. Again, just the fact that I would like to buy a
totally true
AK.
Yeah.
Done. Right? That's a substantial thing. And I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do research before you order an airsoft replica. But I can say pretty comfortably that, like, I don't even remember the brand, but like Phil owned an MP5 for a while. And,
so I did.
it's a gun we like did tech work on because it didn't work right, and it didn't work right because it had nylon bushings in it instead of metal ones. Right? Like, I wonder if that's the problem. You can't buy a gun that bad now. Like, I really genuinely don't think, like, if you order from anywhere reputable a reasonable airsoft replica, you're probably going to get just flat better than that. Probably also flat better than, a lot of this, like the Kraken, like a lot of the stuff that we used.
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Like, and talking about, again, like replicas and things that have changed. So for ages and ages, when I started playing, like Classic Army was one of the like, oh, this is the bar, right? And they make their stuff to like slightly off specs from everything just to be annoying. Like that gun was, I loved it. It was beautiful, but it was a nightmare to tinker with just because it would only mate with pretty much other Classic Army parts. And I'm mostly externally, internally, it's still a gearbox, whatever. But like, at the moment, what I look for is very different, like, because I definitely, I was on an airsoft board today looking at buy and sells, right? Not in a planning to buy something way, but in a like, I got 5 minutes to kill way.
Yep.
And the stuff that I'm looking for, the brands I'm looking for, the kinds of gear I'm looking for are very, very different. Like I bought the Scar again, literally because you had one. Would I buy another Scar? Probably not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, largely because of, you know, for me, issues I have with the way they're built, all of them.
Hmm.
You know, and honestly, because I like the M4 fire selector, you know, whether that makes me a lunatic or not. um,
Listen, it works.
you know,
It works.
yeah,
Yeah,
if it ain't broke.
exactly. I mean, I definitely echo all that. I think there's so much ease. Not that I spend a lot of time like considering new guns. I think we all know for me, I like having one thing and it works well. But
And Phil's
yeah,
smarter about window shopping than I am, because
well,
he
listen,
realizes that window
I just
shopping
spend my money on other stuff.
well, I mean, window shopping leads to buying more stuff.
Yeah. So I have two more questions I want to go through.
Totally.
The first one is, what do you think, or what did you think for sure would change over time? Like when we started playing, what were you like, oh, well, this doesn't exist now, but I'm sure that in the future this will exist. And that hasn't come to pass yet.
Uh, so like the capital T thing for me is just, like I wanted good, safe, launchable grenade launcher airsoft grenades that like worked well from
Yeah.
basically as soon as I knew this hobby existed, like this sport existed. There was no uh like I went from G36 because it looks cool, like, and the one in question was like running a tack light and had a little suppressor on it. And I thought it looked rad. It's not my taste now, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
To okay, gonna get a scar because Phil has a scar, and like I don't think I got through the Wikipedia article or whatever I was reading about the scar for the first time before I was like, oh, I want an EGLM.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, if I were going to buy a new scar, it would only be so that I could put an EGLM on it. And we both know
Of
that.
course. Yeah.
Like, not going to lie to our audience, better, like whatevs.
Yep. No, 100%.
You know,
100%.
and I'm sure someone who's watching this is like, oh yeah, but like the tag-in launchable grenades do the thing. And I agree. I have sort of a qualifier of the ones that do the thing I want the most accurately, i.e., that I can shoot downrange and they will pop and hit people with BBs, are the least safe because they contain pyro. And like, I'm not qualified, if I'm being honest with you, to tell you, oh, these are safe or not. I know that I can't get them in Canada because my government has decided they're not safe. That doesn't inherently mean I agree, but like, I don't have a choice about taking their word for it. So,
Yeah, exactly
honk,
right.
honk, honk. You know, so I'm still waiting on that. And I mean, in fairness, like the day that someone is like, hey, Pat, this exists, and the day that I buy a 6-shot rotating grenade launcher are probably very parallel.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I could 100% see that.
I make no bones about that. But like my, yeah, that's the like, just, oh yeah, this should exist and doesn't.
Hmm.
I'd say for a long while the answer was just frag grenades,
Yeah.
but like you can get reusable good ones now from a bunch of different manufacturers, and I'm starting to really feel like the qualitative differences between the manufacturers are at this point are like, which one do you like best? Which set of features do you want? So again, rad, right? Like, but yeah, those are the like the sensible things, like there's stuff that's like, oh yeah, I'd love to have her.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because for me, like grenades, definitely. I mean, we've seen the rise and fall of airsoft innovations in our time. Number one, they did not exist when we started playing, and they no longer exist, and we're still playing. So, I mean,
Yeah,
rest in
and I
peace,
mean,
guys.
like,
But that's the
yeah,
reality.
I mean, it sucks in like I know that there were issues, and we're not going to get into that.
Hmm.
Like from a personal point of view, if I could buy a brand new Impact Tornado right now, like from manufacturer, I would today.
And buy two.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Right. Like if I,
Yeah.
like mine doesn't work. It hasn't worked for more than a full season. It's just not reparable at this point functionally. But if I could just go, like, even accounting for inflation, like clicky, melee, gimme, there'd be one in my kit. right?
Yeah,
Or two,
absolutely.
like
One of the things that I thought for sure would be solved, and it has been solved, but not in the way that I expected. For me, I thought it was going to be airsoft range and accuracy. I thought that they would come up with some way of making airsoft replicas accurate to like 200 meters, like out of the box, right? Something like that. And my thinking process around it was um, rifled BBs and rifled barrels and stuff like that. And I know that there have been some tests with that and blah blah blah, but they've never been effective. Just because I guess the precision manufacturing that's required, etc. I don't really know, but I thought for sure that that was going to happen. And actually, the way that they've solved that was different because now we do have replicas that are maybe not 200 meters. That's probably quite a distance. But you have
that is
replicas
virtually
now with
exceeding
their R
capacity.
hops.
But
Well, yeah, it's
you know,
crazy.
but yeah,
But it's nothing to have a replica that will shoot 60 meters, 200 feet, right,
I mean,
out of the
like,
box
you
with an R hop, etc. And then you tune it, you could get even bigger, better results than that.
I mean, like,
right?
one of the things that I think, like, to me is just like, is the amount of range and accuracy Steph gets on his tanker 416, right? His like PDW 416 with an S hop, and yes, it's HPA. I'm like, it's very, very nice, but just like,
Yeah.
the hell.
You showed that to like 2006 Phil or 2007 Pat, and we would have lost our minds. Like,
I mean,
it's not possible with
I think
witchcraft.
I think comfortably that gun outshoots everything we used prior to, say, my building the rifle that you were using the body of.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'd say it's probably right.
And like, I think it comfortably outshoots all of those and matches that, which is, just, and it's just the hobby got more popular, the sport got more popular, so there are more brains going, what can we do with this? The quality of the internal parts that are available went up, and the cost went down, which is a nice combination. Our understanding of the physics got better because people with engineering degrees went, hey, I'm going to do the math for you, Pat, so you can look it on a table. And I went, oh, thank God.
Great. Yeah.
Right. Like, so yeah, the knowledge pool is so enormously better, and it's awesome, and I love it. And like, I if you want to talk about changes, right? Like, I'm not running the P90 because I realized it was a bad idea. After buying and using the Scorpion, like, again, I have a better idea of like, what do I actually want if I'm going to field something that's smaller than the M27? And the answer is a carbine, because I'm an oak or an ogre or a bugbear, like some large fantasy creature that is hostile.
Tune in next year for Pat's escapades with an MP7 that he bought.
Oh my God. I mean, like, I could use it as a sidearm.
Yeah. No, like, watch now. It's going to happen.
Like, that's always been true.
Okay, last question for you now. So all this has been about change in the past. Now let's talk about change in the future, and in particular, it's 2024 now. There's a new airsoft season coming up, not this month, surely, but in a couple of months, maybe, April, May, if we get really lucky. What are we changing this year? What are some of the things that you're looking to change when you compare on last year, and also maybe in your mindsets, or like, what are some of the changes that you're focusing on this year?
So, the getting my health stuff, the colitis stuff specifically, under control is going well, which is going to help. Like, I'm just less tired. It turns out bleeding internally is not great for your energy level. Go figure.
Yep.
So like, that being better is going well. I hope it's going to continue because, as I said previously, like, at our sort of end of season thing, like, I didn't get enough airsoft this season to satiate my desire to play airsoft. So got to work on that. Got to work on the physical fitness stuff. That's also going well, relatively speaking. Like, I'm not skinny Pat again, but like, I'm not as fat Pat, and I'll take it. Right. That's a win.
Yep. One step at a time.
So that sort of stuff is pretty good. In terms of like airsoft play stuff, play more. I want to work with you to organize another couple of ops next year that was fun. Like, that was, it's a significant amount of work, but it was enjoyable. So like, and in terms of kit stuff, I have some, bits and pieces to pick up. At time of recording, like, I still haven't gotten around to selling the Scorpion. I still haven't picked up the holster, and like, I'm genuinely sort of like, do I want to start? Do I want to try something else just for the fun of it? Because like I said, I don't really have a retention issue where we're playing now. So
yeah, really.
But something like that is effective. I'm still thinking about maybe picking up a lower, like a pair of gasket goggles or gasket like sunglasses, Oakleys, whatever. Largely because the big, huge goggles that I wear definitely do have a drawback in terms of like getting down on the scope, right? Getting down on my optic.
Yep, definitely.
And so like, I can see that being a practical, like actual play benefit. I haven't thrown money at it right now because like, it's, tis the season to be spending money on other people, or just past. And I also have some time, so I can decide which ones I want and read a bunch of reviews, and then read a bunch more reviews, and then order them. In terms of,
it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's the big change for me. Is my advancers are basically shot. The frame is cracked. Getting a new one is very expensive. I could find some, but at that price, I might as well just look for something new. So I tried the Pyramex ones. They were okay. I've got a couple more that are in the mail. And I've got time, right? So I've got time to try some with gaskets and shooting glasses. I haven't worn shooting glasses in forever, right? So opportunity to sort of change that up and see what works and find a solution that is, as good as probably a tall order, because those were the best. But I mean, find something that's, not meaningfully worse would be great.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Like, obviously my lineups aren't going anywhere. They're indestructible, or seem to be. But like, if I can get something that does the couple of things that would be better for me, that would be really cool. I am unlikely to come into the money to fully HPA, to buy a 416 carbine and fully HPA it. So unless I do somehow, I'm probably not doing that in the immediate or near future. So like, most of my next season changes are going to be like tinkering with stuff. I want to, I might look into, just wiring the box mag to the 249, so they're all just like, it's all just working together, because that's not terribly hard to do. It's not even really outside my skill set. Although the fix that I have currently is working, so like, that's cool. I might buy a second box mag for it, just to like have for when the current one explodes.
Yep. Or if you run out of battery.
Yeah, just preventative, right?
Yep.
So stuff like that. One of the things I'm keeping an eye on various airsoft buy sells for is a cheap, I don't care if it works even really, EOTech. I don't need an optic on the 249. I just think it looks cool with an EOTech. So if I can find like a 552 or 553, I'm going to pick it up, just for the shits and giggles. And like I said, I might not even put batteries in it. Like, that's not.
I'll have to see if I maybe have one kicking around still somewhere.
Yeah, man. Like, that's the functionality, right? Like, I don't need it. I think it just looks cool, and like, the amount of added weight is irrelevant. It's an LMG, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, but I'm trying to take your advice of just like, you have a really good primary. You basically didn't field it this season very much. Be smart about that. Do that. So yeah, more like just getting the loose ends squared away and making a couple of positive changes to my kit. I'm still looking at, like grabbing a couple of new kinds of camo just for, again, the fun of it. Stuff like that. It would be, if I felt like I had money, which at the moment I don't, because, paying for Christmas, is, yeah, like, I could see picking up another sidearm at some point, just because I think they're cool, but I'm trying to restrain my it's shiny urges.
Yeah.
And like, Just focus
I'll
up.
try and talk you out of that one offline.
No, I appreciate it.
I'll but you know what? One thing that is absolutely not changing this season is the fact that we're still doing Call Your Hits.
Totally.
We are going to be doing this every week, either with Pat or with the various guests that that we're able to track down. Hopefully, we'll have a few different community members as well from the Discord joining us this year, just to talk a little bit about their experiences playing airsoft in their part of the world and what that's like and how that compares to what you do or what you don't do in your area.
Totally.
And so, yeah, we're very much looking forward to doing all of that. And we're going to start off real strong with an episode next week, talking to Chris Schultz, the 6mm Mandalorian, about the upcoming Star Wars game during Star Wars weekend in May of this year. So look out for that one.
I love that, but also his content is so bad for me.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Like, it's just like, oh my god, the money I could spend.
Right. But guys, thank you so much for listening again. Thank you for being here with us on our journey in 2024. Look forward to that episode next week with Chris Schultz. But until then, that's all we got for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in, guys, and Happy New Year.